Meka Asonye is partner at First Round, or ex-sales bro, as he likes to say. He's an investor in PLG companies who are layering on sales, and he's been a really amazing thought partner in creating this category, product-led sales. And before moving to the investment side, Meka was a senior sales leader at both Stripe and Mixpanel, and just has like a wealth of knowledge in sales teams and how to kind of marry PLG and sales. And then
best part is I wasn't always boring and traditional. I used to work for the Cleveland Indians or Cleveland Guardians, where I met Bill Costigan a way back. So I used to have a really fun. I mean, I love my job now, but I used to.
Meta, today's job isn't fun.
I love your midnight texts, Alexa. They're great.
I will update my bio for you for nenext time, Meka. I'll make sure to lead with the baseball reference. Awesome. And then we also have Alexa Grabell, who is the CEO and co-founder of Pocus. Pocus is a product-led sales platform. And Alexa's passion for product-led sales started when she led sales strategy and operations at Dataminer. She essentially built an internal tool that is very similar to Pocus. And it was all about enabling sales teams with data, trying to get them the data that they need so they can do their jobs better. Do you have a fun fact to beat Meka's?
I was just going to say, I was trying to rack my brain for something as cool as Meka's past, and I've got nothing for you, Sandy. I'm just a boring sales ops person.
You're definitely far from boring. But yeah, it's kind of hard to beat Meka's baseball reference there. So with further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Alexa, who's going to talk a little bit about what we're diving into today, which is the product-led sales benchmark report. And then we're going to jump into the conversation piece. Quick for everybody, if you have questions throughout, please add them to the chat. I'm going to be kind of jotting them down, and then we'll leave 10 minutes at the end for open Q&A. Sound good?
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. So really excited to be here. I see some familiar faces and new faces, which is awesome. And super pumped to be here with Meka, who's been my partner in crime in everything product-led sales. And we had a lot of fun building this report together and diving into the insights. So this is really meant to be casual chat about what we found, the data we found around product-led sales, and hypothesizing where this is going in the future. So the plan for today, I'll walk through some really straightforward 5 minutes of slides, just so we can get baseline of what we're chatting about and what we're excited to see in the data. Then we'll open it up, and Meka and I are going to chat about what we saw and learned. So today, Meka and I are chatting about the state of product-led sales. A little bit about why we conducted the survey. So earlier in the year, I was looking for data around product-led sales, how do sales teams operate at PLG companies, and realized the data just didn't exist. There weren't any other benchmark surveys, reports, best practices, frameworks. So we put our research hats on, and I teamed up with Meka and some other first round folks on the call, like Jesse, I see, actually survey over 200 different go-to-market leaders at PLG companies. So you can see some of the folks we surveyed right here with their logos. And we asked everything from what is the structure of your company, the plan that you're using, and how do you execute sales at a PLG company? Sandy, I'll put you on mute duty. Okay, cool. So what is product-led sales? I think most of you have heard me say this over and over again, but if you're new here, product-led sales isn't just taking a PLG motion and layering the old school way of sales on top. PLG is actually a bottom-up go-to-market model that uses the existing users of your product as the main funnel for sales. So in the old school sales, you would just cold outbound, try to chat with everyone at maybe a cool logo you're excited about, ping them a bunch of times, maybe use some customer fit data. This is flipping it on the head. This is now you have a huge user base of users that are realizing value out of your product and loving your product, which creates a great opportunity for sales teams to add more value and then accelerate growth for their organizations. So I'll walk you through some of the 4 highlights of data that we saw in the report. So there is this myth that sales at PLG companies don't exist. So you heard maybe like a decade ago where Slack and Atlassian would come out and say, you know, our product sells itself. Sales doesn't exist. We don't need sales anymore. And then more recently, people are starting to acknowledge that sales does exist. And we were excited to see that this myth I've been saying this forever, that this myth of no sales at PLG is busted, but I'm glad that the data can prove it now, because 97% of respondents said that they either have a PLG motion in sales team or plans to add sales soon. So you can see about half of the companies that we interviewed have PLG and a sales motion. About 30% are completely sales-led, moving to PLG. Another 13% is PLG and trying to, in the early stages of implementing that sales team. So we're now acknowledging PLS exists. We need product-led sales at organizations, but it's still in its infancy. So there are no tools or best practices that are yet widely adopted, but there were some promising data points, such as almost 25% of folks that we interviewed are planning to purchase a solution to actually, empower product-led sales and make it happen at their organizations. Third takeaway is PQLs, or product qualified leads, are gaining traction with sales teams. So I actually found this to be one of the more promising statistics that we saw. We asked people what most accurately describes your sales motion. So about 72% said they're getting a lot of inbound, which makes sense for PLG, and they're managing it. 50% are conducting outbound to MQLs, and almost an equal amount, 46.8%, are conducting outbound to PQLs. So I was really excited to see that even in these early stages of adopt product-led sales motion, folks are reaching out to PQLs, product qualified leads, users that have engaged with your product, almost as much as MQLs. And I predict that number to just go way up in 2022. And then finally, sales assist is sneaking into the sales org chart. So sales assist, there's a lot of names for this. You can call it product specialist, onboarding specialist, product advocate. It's essentially the team that is helping guide users on their journey. They're not selling, they're guiding, they're assisting, they're helping them realize value, make sure there's no blockers, added friction, etc. So I actually was hypothesizing, so I know in my own bubble, sales assist is all the talk, but I was actually shocked to see that 30% of respondents already have a sales assist team, which is a ton if you think about it. And I expect that this number to go way, way, way up in 2022 as well. So what is the TLDR of the state of PLS? So 2021 for product-led sales in the category was really acknowledging sales doesn't only exist, but it's absolutely necessary. It's a key function of PLG companies. 2022 is going to be a lot about, okay, now how do we form the best practices and create the playbooks to make product-led sales a key function and the competitive advantage for those early adopters? And then beyond that, this will become more and more mainstream in all SaaS businesses. So I'll pause there before I asked Meka some questions. He asked me some questions. Anything in the chat? All right.
Question for you, just real quick on the sales assist creeping into the org chart. That's different than like a solutions consultant or like an onboarding specialist from CS?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're starting to see the merge of some of these roles. So onboarding specialist, for example, that role maybe historically fit into more of a solutions engineering or CS role. But now that a lot of onboarding is happening pre-sales versus post-sales, that role is starting to blend more with sales assist. So before you're even going from, self-serve to a paid product, sales assist might get involved to say, hey, realize you're using this feature. I think that if you use this new thing, you'll get a lot more value. Or, hey, I wanted to make sure that you weren't running into any blockers. So that's the role that we're starting to see emerge more and more. But I will say something that I'm excited to see play out in 2022 is also where the handoffs happen between sales assist and CS, pre-sales and post-sales.
Yep. Got it. So product adoption, or early product adoption. Driving like early product. Yep, got it. Helpful. Thank you.
I think the other thing that's interesting on that is, one of the things I see that a lot of companies are tempted to do, especially at the stage where we invest, is they see what big companies look like, or they see what they're successful. We want to be here. We want to be like this Series C or Series D company. And out of the gates, they start trying to do that from day one. They start trying to have sales assist, AEs, customer success, sales engineers. And it's like all of a sudden you've got 4 people mapped against a buyer who's just one buyer, and you're like, why is there all this complexity? Why are there all these handoffs? And I think one of the really important things is to make sure that you're matching the maturity of your organization with sort of like the maturity of your customers and where you are, where you actually are. And I think some of the best processes are sometimes having one person span multiple functions, really figure out like what are the right touch points all along the journey of going from I've never heard of your product to I'm toying around with your product to I'm buying your product, and then I'm expanding and staying with you for multiple years. And as you start to do more work in each category and figure out like what are the jobs to be done for each of those steps, then slowly starting to break that role into separate pieces and specialize. But I think the failure mode is trying to specialize right out of the gates and not really fully understanding what that like happy path looks like for your customers.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I'll also add to that what we saw in the data is that folks' first hire is typically a generalist AE for sales, where they can, dive into understanding their self-serve users, how to convert them to paid, or maybe go from paid to the next tier of a plan. But they're doing a little bit of everything, right? They're doing some of the qualification that an SDR would do. They're doing some of the onboarding. They're doing the product adoption. They're doing the discovery. So it's really that generalist role. And one other point I found interesting in the data is that most companies, 75%, aren't hiring a sales rep until at least $500K to $1 million in revenue, which means that it's really important to get that PLG motion up and running and you have that user growth flywheel going before you start to kind of pressure in a sales rep, because you want the sales rep at a PLG company to have a good user base to fish from rather than going outbound.
Yeah. I think the other reason you want a little bit of that delay in bringing on a salesperson until you've got some real ARR is like, you can't skip the step of founder-led sales. Like I think Alexa's probably in this right now and spending so much time with initial design partners and customers in really understanding the need and the pain point. And once you understand what problems your customers have, how they want to buy, what other alternatives they have, it's so much easier to then bring someone on and say, hey, I've done this now 7 or 8 times. Here's where you're going to get hung up. Here's what our customers need from us. And like trying to short circuit that founder-led sales path where you just say, oh, I want to hire someone else. You do your company a disservice. One, because you also forget as a founder, you've got the unique ability to get in rooms with people that like an SDR never will be able to, or an AE never will be able to. And so much of that is because you can say, I've spent time with these 8 amazing companies and I can tell you about the missteps, or I can tell you about how they're solving it. So all of a sudden, these conversations that you're having with founders, even if they don't buy, or companies, even if they don't buy your product, they walk away saying, Alexa taught me something about how to define PQLs, or Alexa taught me about how one of my peers might have made a mistake and I'm not going to make that mistake. And so that step of getting all learnings across the industry and really teaching your potential customers something, I think is so valuable in this journey.
Totally agree. So switching gears a little, I like that we just went straight into tactical recommendations, but actually taking a step back, Meka, I'm curious with what the 4 kind of data points I just showed you about what we saw in the survey. Does that resonate with what you're seeing in the market, and how does that compare with both what you're seeing today with FounderLed First Round, but also when you were leading sales orgs at Stripe and Mixpanel?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I remember one of the earliest stories in 2016 when I told someone that I worked at sales at Stripe, and they're like, Stripe doesn't have a sales team. It's self-serve. And I just kind of laughed. And like, there obviously are products out there where sales teams don't exist, but I guarantee you the ACVs of those products are like swiping credit cards. And also I would guess they're not selling into the mid-market or enterprise. They're selling to really small companies. And so my friend Danny Hers was at Sequoia. She ran sales at Slack. And I remember her telling a similar type of story where someone was like, wait, but I thought Slack doesn't have a sales team. So I think this myth is finally, hopefully over. I think that this is going to be the year where people realize even these like really companies that folks admire that have really good PLG motions, they may have a piece of their business that is very self-serve, but like everyone in this room knows where the revenue comes from, and most of the revenue comes from having a sales involved. You just don't see a 100K contract signed without any help. And so I'm excited about that myth finally being busted, that these companies, even the developer-focused companies, like they have sales teams. I think how we sell has changed. It's no longer, I got this 4 emails from somebody who said the same message over and over and over and added zero value, and also paying the 5 other partners at first round. I'm like, are you selling like it's 1990? Come on, like get it together. Make sure you're teaching with every touch. Make sure you're
They need a sales assist team, Meka. You should have responded with that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the day where that no longer happens, where every sales organization has evolved. And I think the funny thing is too, is that my guess would be that most of the people in this room, like y'all are on the cutting edge. You're sitting here in this webinar, so I know you've thought about it, but there are so many companies who literally actually, like Alexa said at the beginning, have no idea what product-led growth or product-led sales is. But I think that the sort of adoption curve is changing almost at the rate, like no one knew what Web3 was a year ago. And like now all of our moms are asking us about NFTs. And I think that like this is the NFT Web3 year for product-led growth and product-led sales.
I love it. I love it. I totally agree. Like I know Meka mentioned this at the beginning when only there were a few people here, but in early 2021, I was saying the word product-led sales and people were looking at me like I had 3 heads. And then now I'm getting like daily inbounds of, hey, can you help me set up my product-led sales motion? And people are changing their title to product-led sales in their job titles and hiring for that, which is amazing. And yes, Rob, I totally love golf trips, and steak dinners are my space. I love it. So maybe like value-added selling is TikTok or something. We can use that. Go ahead, Meka.
No, I was going to say the other funny thing that I think you're going to start to see is the way that people value companies. Like everyone knows about LTV to CAC. Everyone knows about sales efficiency. So I think part of this is an adjustment to people want to be able to experience a product before they buy it. Like they don't want to just take someone's word. They don't want to just look at a slide deck. They oftentimes want to play with their own data in order to really make it powerful. And I'm sure you've seen this with some companies, or once they see their Pocus dashboard, they're like, okay, I get it now. I see the companies and I wouldn't have seen these before. We saw this at Mixpanel as well, where when you do a POC and they actually have their own data in there and you get folks playing with it, it just, the light bulb goes on, and then it's so much easier to make the sale. I think the other thing about product-led growth and product-led sales is like, it's just a far more efficient sales cycle. And so as companies, the only thing that really matters in today's market is growth. And I think people are starting, and where we are in the market cycle, my guess is that profitability and efficiency is going to become more in vogue than just like how much money can you light on fire in a year. And so, you know, I think that this is going to be another gigantic tailwind for product-led sales.
Totally. I very much so agree. I'm curious, what did you think about the stats around PQLs and MQLs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a ton of sense that one, figuring out what the ideal PQ for someone, I think it's like can be a really hard task. It doesn't necessarily roll off the tongue. It may change on industry. It may change by sort of customer size. It may change by use case. And so to me, it's not surprising that like people are still trying to figure this out. I think there's also this other huge blocker, which is like at Stripe, at Mixpanel, at many of the companies that we work with at First Round, like there's just no great tooling to figure it out. Like at the best companies, I remember talking to folks at Coda, talking to folks at Notion. At the best companies, people are taking a bunch of time to build some internal system to make it possible to figure out like which users we should engage and when. And like everyone knows that at high growth companies, the biggest bandwidth is engineering bandwidth. So anytime you're like, hey, sales, we need something, engineers like look at you like you have 7 eyes and you're like, get in the back of the line. And so it's not surprising sort of where we are on this journey, just understanding that like engineers all make $1 bajillion. It's impossible to hire and find them right now. And so when companies are asking their internal tools teams to build something, it's just not the highest priority. And so that's the other thing that I'm really, really excited about is there being quality tooling for, folks to be able to actually integrate a product-led sales model. And especially for, one of the things that I loved about was giving enterprise level tools to really small companies. And so I think that, if Alexa, y'all are really successful, you will give sort of like enterprise level tools. When you are successful, you will give enterprise level tools to small companies who don't have the resources internally to build the infrastructure to really get the most value out of their PQLs and MQLs.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to flip this back on you. And so you've been having conversations with some of the best companies. What are you learning from the conversation? What are people doing that are actually working? What's the biggest pain point that you're seeing?
Yeah. And I think you nailed it. So with PQLs, it's not a new thing, but it's hard to get access to the right data to define your PQLs. And then these teams are relying on 6-month project from their data teams and engineers to predict what a PQL is for them. So one of my favorite stories is Slack. Actually, they were trying to define some of what their PQLs are. And they asked their sales and customer facing teams, what do you think are the actions in the product that lead to conversion or higher ARR? And then they ran the data and spent a long time actually doing this from a mathematical perspective. And they were the exact same answer. So what I'm learning is PQLs are a little bit of art and science. Yes, you need to use data to hypothesize what your PQLs should be as a starting point, but then your customer facing teams are also going to have a really good understanding of what those PQLs should be. So product qualified leads are, yes, art and science, a little bit of data, doing a little predictive modeling to figure out what they are, but also art in the fact that when you're exploring a new segment or a new market, you're going to have to use your own intuition and gut to figure out what those should be. And they're always iterative, right? Like your PQL today, when you're going after the North American mid-market segment, is going to be different when you expand geographies in 6 months. So it's always also an iterative process. So that's really what we're seeing. And that's where people are you don't mean to promote Pocus, but that's where people are like seeing the value there, where they don't have to rely on the engineering and data teams to actually figure out what the PQLs are. It's a self-serve way to understand that. So you save the feedback loop time from the data and engineering team to the sales teams. I'll also say that the folks that are using PQLs rather than just relying on MQLs and SQLs are seeing a big lift in conversion. Sandy, I know you know the metric on what is it, like 5x?
Yeah, 5x.
5x faster conversion using PQLs and MQLs. So to me, it's okay. It's kind of like where we are with product-led sales. We know we need to do it, but how? It's the same with PQLs. We know they're important, but it's really hard to do. So we need to figure out the best practices and the tooling to get it done. And I was actually surprised still that 43% of companies are still doing cold outbound, because if you have a strong PLG motion, even if you're targeting enterprise companies, you should still be looking at how existing users are engaging with the product to inform the go-to-market. So for example, if you're Slack and trying to sell into a bigger company, I don't know, if you're Slack trying to sell into Walmart, you should still understand if anyone at Walmart has started signing up for Slack before just going after the head of XYZ to try to sell it. It's a much stronger story to say, hey, look how your team's already using Slack. Look how many messages they've sent. Look how many integrations. Look how much value they've received. Now can we have this conversation? So go ahead, Meka.
I was going to say, and I'd even take that one step forward, because I think the thing that I've seen most frequently is like, almost like software is bottoms up. I think this idea, this thought, this movement is also going to be something that's bottoms up. And so the only way for it to actually work is for the people who are on the ground to believe this is going to work. This isn't a top down, like, hey, everyone, we're transitioning from one motion to a product-led growth motion. I think what I've seen be effective, and one of the things that happened at Stripe, is we were selling our subscriptions product. So a value-added service over just core payments. And we were trying to figure out, like, how do we sell this high margin product? And there were we kind of split my team into two different task forces. One could basically select a bunch of accounts, and they could outbound to them to try to sell to them. And then the other one, we were going to use a bunch of signals in the product to then send the same message and see what the uptick was. And so group 2 was 5x better than group 1. And I think going in, we were putting money on like, okay, which side is going to be more successful? And the people were like, oh, I get to hand to a list. I'm going to be able to look at their business model, figure out who they are, write an email, and we're going to win. And I was like, I'm not really sure. There's like a bunch of information that we could use. So like, obviously we're selling a subscriptions billing product. And all you need to do is go to the accounts who bill multiple customers the same thing over and over. So like that was the like automated group. And I don't know what the manual group did, but the best part about this was like running this experiment for 6 months and then releasing the data to the team that says, look what happened with the manual team versus look what happened when we took a couple of signals and said, we think that these are going to be good customers. And you could just see the light bulb go on for all the sales reps in the room of like, oh shit, this is easy. Like, you almost stack the deck. It's unfair that you were able to have that good of targeting. And so, I think within inside of companies, you need to figure out like, what is going to be that moment for you? How do you, really think about it top down, but also really thinking about it bottom up of enabling someone to be really successful and then letting them tell their story to their peers of like, this is what a conversation is like when someone has already used our product and has some value. It's like, where do I sign on the dotted line? How do I make sure I have this? And that is just so much more powerful than like trying to push something out heavy-handedly.
Totally agree. Tim, do you want to chat about your question?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Want to say it out loud?
I would love to. So as I'm listening to this presentation, it makes complete sense to me for a seat-based or tier-based SaaS model of upselling rapid users, of selling more seats, moving to another tier, a la Salesforce. Like that is clicking with me. I'm curious how you have seen it or not seen it be successful with like a transaction-based model where it's API queries where you're trying to drive more, the monetization is tied to the frequency and volume of usage, not necessarily signing on the line that is dotted. So I'd love to hear you kind of talk through that because I'm having a tough time making that connection, and I'm guessing you have a lot of insights.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Alexa.
I'll say quickly because then Meka can speak from firsthand. The usage-based pricing model goes hand in hand with product-led sales, 100%. Like we work with a ton of those companies, whether they're dev tools or analytics tools, where the next tiering model is based on how much usage they've had. And it's really the same methodology, right? Like you just need to be analyzing that data and informing your go-to-market motion with it, whether it's increase in seats, increases in messages, or increase of usage. Like that's still data points that are valuable for your go-to-market. Whether it's so that you can then say, how do I add more value to you? Is it more usage? Is it others on the product? So to me, they're very similar, but I'll let Meka speak about it as well.
Yeah, I actually think it may be easier in transaction-based models. And so, I think one of the canonical examples is Twilio. It's so easy to say, okay, you're an engineer, you're trying to build something and you want to test it as quickly as possible. So imagine two different companies, one where there's a contact sales button, and then you go through this conversation and they sell you on like, here's how we're different than all of our competitors, and like try to get you to dinner, email 5 other stakeholders at the organization to say, hey, I'm talking to this person, like I'd love to get in front of you and talk about what we're talking about. And you're like, no, leave me the F alone. Now imagine model 2, where it's like the developer is actually just empowered to go build something right away. And you can choose whether or not you like stop them from using it after like 100 uses, or you give them 80% of the solution and you withhold 20% of it. But like the key here is like reduce friction at all costs. Let people get in, build, use, and then you like have the signal that goes spotty alert. This person has like signed in, 7 days, or this person has hit is 10% before their free threshold is over. Now is a great time to say, hey, it looks like you've been using our product a lot. I would love, and you're going to run this thing in, a week, or you're about to hit the paywall. I would love to talk to you about what it looks like to, work fully together. And so I prefer the transaction-based model because like, I also think that it makes it easy. So you align the incentives of the organization and your customer, like you only get value when they get value. And so to me, that just makes it really easy to sell from a very genuine point of view, which is like, I want you to be as happy as possible because your happiness means I get paid and I'm happy as well. And so, I think it can be really successful in transaction-based models. I think the hardest time you have with product-led growth is when there's a bunch of gatekeepers and a bunch of different stakeholders where you need 5 or 6 different people with very different points of view to agree that this is a solution. And so that's when, I think there's still ways to layer on product-led motions, but I think that tends to be where you see, true enterprise sales still winning.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I'll also say one example I find a company that does this really well is Zapier, like both from understanding their sales motion and how they're thinking about it, but also being a user. Like we ran into the limits. And so they sent an email, hey, you've been an active user of Zapier for 3 months and I've seen you done X, Y, and Z. Want to hop on the phone so I can make sure that we get you on the right plan. And that was like such a better experience to me than the person just cold calling me a million times and telling me why I can see the value. They waited until I experienced the value and then they stepped in to help. Does that answer your question, Tim?
It does. That was super helpful because actually Meka Twilio was the company front of mind for me. So you kind of laying that out so concretely was very helpful. Thank you to both of you.
Of course.
Of course. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Meka.
Oh no, I was gonna jinx.
I would love to sort of understand how you both think about what the CRM of the future is going to look like, because I think it makes a lot more sense for sales teams to be looking at data of how customers are interacting with the product rather than when you last spoke to a customer 6 months ago. So curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I'll go
Go,
quick
Meka.
and then I'll let you go. I will say, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I guarantee you that Salesforce should be worried. The number of people, founders that I've talked to who are like, I'm building a tool to help people set up Salesforce or to help people's Salesforce instances suck less. Like when you start to hear that over and over and over, you know that the incumbent has a problem. I think, they've done such a good job of building a giant platform. And so it's going to be hard, but I know that when there's customer pain and a bunch of sort of like the most forward thinking companies are asking about like, what can I do to avoid Salesforce? They're going to go down eventually. I wish I knew what that company was going to look like because I'd go invest in them and, I'd be really happy. But Alexa, maybe you have more sense of what exactly the customer wants.
Yeah, so it's a great question, Alex, and it's something we hear a lot. When you think about sales in the CRM and how it was created for traditional enterprise sales, it's starting with the buyer, right? Like you are reaching out to a buyer, you're capturing notes on that, and you're continuing to track the progress there. With PLG and PLS, you're flipping that on its head. The first interaction starts with usage. And so where does usage live? It typically lives in something like a data warehouse, like Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, of capturing information like who signed up, how are they engaging with the product, who's sharing the product. So what happens is there becomes in product-led sales motions 2 different systems of record. You have the CRM, which is a system of record capturing customer fit information. And then you have the data warehouse, which is capturing the PLG, the product usage metrics. So the problem really with CRMs in the PLG world is that it's no longer the only system of record. And so there are some ad hoc solutions you can do, like use tools to try to plumb some of the metrics into the CRM, but it's not robust enough to handle all of that data. So my thesis is that more and more the data warehouse is going to become the system of record for all customer data. And that is going to be where, your usage, but also customer fit, but also buying intent data lives. And that's the thesis we're building on, right? Like Pocus right now lives on top of the data warehouse and the CRM so that we can combine those different systems of record so you can have one source of truth into your data. But over time, I believe we'll just have to live directly on top of the data warehouse, and we can be the kind of way that sales and go-to-market teams see directly into all of that data. So I do see a world where CRMs become less, like Salesforce is not going to be the winning product for product-led growth companies.
I also think, one other thing that I think you might see is a more cross-functional tool. So I think that the best organizations, again, they don't have these big divides up between product, success, sales, support. Like you are one person who just needs the organization to put their best foot forward. And these barriers oftentimes put up walls, whether it's like sales is losing a bunch of stuff or support is hearing about all of these problems and they're not necessarily getting back to product. So I'm super bullish on some tool that like all teams think of as their central source of truth and just help create a better product and a better experience for our end users.
I also think the word CRM is going to be outdated. Like everyone thinks about CRMs and they're like, ugh, like I don't want to check it. I don't want to track it. It doesn't even help me. It's something that my boss makes me do. And it's just going to be a new model where it's all, sales reps can manage their own workflows and dashboards and everything without relying on some archaic system and Salesforce administrators. Alex, does that resonate with what you had in mind?
Very much so. Yeah, and hopefully Pocus can be that cross-functional tool that sort of bridges all of the various different, I guess, sorts of point solution sources of truth.
That's the goal.
I see two questions that I want to answer real quick. So Dan McKnight said, how does revenue forecasting change as things move away from the traditional enterprise sales motion? I think one, they get more accurate. You don't have the same issue of like lumpiness in the forecast. Everything comes in at the very end, like having to freaking bother reps to get them to fill out all this shit. I think what you start to see is, especially is when we've seen more organizations that are more product led, it's a similar equation. Like, what goes in and what comes out, and it makes for this like amazing predictability of the business. And like, that is part of the reason why I love SMB and like lower mid-market, is so much of that is very, very predictable. So I could always call a number and I'd never miss, because what the equation looks like, and maybe it slowly changes as you figure out a few different tweaks. But I think it's just easier, it's more automatic. And then I think the other piece about revenue forecasting, which I'm sure Gong is already going down that path, but I think you're going to start to see products that are already in a workflow that are telling you what's going to happen versus relying on the subjectivity of reps. And then Derek, you asked, like, how do you go about getting executive buy-in for a product-led sales strategy? Like, I think you always have to lead with numbers and metrics. Like, here's the hypothesis. Here's what I'm hearing from who we want our customers to be, what they're saying, running a small test and just showing like, you give me this amount of resources and this is what comes out. And I think anytime you go to an executive team or a CEO and say, I think I can give you $5 million of ARR with $500,000 of investments, like people's ears perk up. And then you just sort of talk through like what that actually looks like. So I think, yeah, come in with the hypothesis where you can, try to have that backed up with numbers and then have that conversation.
I totally agree. And I'll add one thing to Derek's and then we can go to Joey. We've gotten this question a lot, and I actually can send you a post we wrote on this. So you're right that in order to have a robust product-led sales strategy, it has to come top down, meaning like your team has to all be aligned. You can't have sales running after this and not have buy-in from product and marketing. It wouldn't work. And so what you need to do, again, I agree with Meka, like have those proof points and back it up with data. And something we've seen is even like when you take a step back, it's very logical. You can say, would you rather go after cold leads that have never heard of our product, that might get really pissed off from me emailing them, or users that have had some sort of engagement with our product, realize value, and then it's a 5x quicker sales motion. So having that story when you take a step back, rather than being like, I think this is a cool new approach, I've seen this work at other companies, they're winning. Like the last 20 IPOs or whatever have had a product-led motion. Like start to use those data points because it is a truth. But I totally agree. And I like that you're thinking that you need executive buy-in, because this isn't just like sales working on their own. You need that support from growth, marketing, success, product, et cetera. Meka, I'll hand it over for you to start with Joey. I haven't ready yet.
Joey, what about networked versus traditional products? Simply try to replicate content and community solution for potential enterprise customers, even if one-off. Joey, do you mind giving an example of like, what do you mean by network product?
Yeah, happy to. So a product that relies on the experience of the user in lockstep with other users, with a community. So I sell a coaching product for a living. And so we can create a workshop, certainly. We can open up a portion of our experience to the public, but it's not going to replicate what it looks like. You mentioned like giving away 80% instead of 100%. Like the best we can do is probably 20% instead of 100%. Is that still the go-to strategy and we do plenty of that, or do you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing, and this is going to be like probably not the message that Alexa wants to hear, is like, there are some times where companies say we're going to be product led, and I'm like, are you though? Like, and so you can't force fit everything to work. And so I don't I don't know that it makes sense for all network products. Like if there's this marketplace and there's a chicken and the egg, like doesn't really help to just like open it up. I think then you want to really focus on reducing friction. I think then you also want to figure out how can I create proof points from other customers who are telling people about it, more word of mouth and virality. But, as much as it's a really efficient model, I think it's only a really efficient model for companies where it makes sense. And there are certain buying cycles and certain products where it makes less sense. And I think then the name of the game is like, how do we just enable our customers and get out of the way to allow adoption as smooth as possible?
Agreed. So we have 5 minutes left. Meka, I'd love to, it almost feels surreal that we did a state of product-led sales given May. We were like first meeting and pontificating on what product-led sales is. And now it's starting to become a real necessity in organizations. Where do you see the future of product-led sales going?
I think a couple of things. I think the tooling, whether it's I think tooling has to change. I think it's probably not going to be led internally just because of the cost and the scarcity of engineering talent. So really looking forward to Pocus being able to enable lots of people to be far more successful. I think for better or worse, like Salesforce, like we're stuck with it until one of you decides that you're going to go build something better, and hit me up if you do decide to do that. But I think for now, like it is what it is, and you've kind of got to make the most and the best of it. I think also, like we talked about this before, but like PLG, PLS, like this is a company-wide, go-to-market wide decision. It's not just driven by one person. For it to work, you said it before, it has to be cross-functional. Product, marketing, sales, all have to be like on the same page. And it's also cultural. I told the story of like the top down versus bottoms up. You've got to make sure the people who are actually the foot soldiers and talking to customers, like they need to be really, really bought in. I think the other thing that happens anytime you're early in a journey is like this community, like look at the companies that you respect, understand how things are doing well, and learn from them. And Alexa, for your team, I think it's a chance for you to share some of those learnings that you're having because you're having the same conversation over and over and over again. So I'm just really excited about, again, this year being our Web3 moment and seeing product-led sales really, tip the scale, and also just seeing customers have a much better experience. I want to stop being emailed and cold called on my cell phone. And so really looking forward to product-led sales being full bore.
Totally.
And
I love it.
What about you?
I totally agree, both from the better customer experience, the better sales team experience. I'd say I really agree with everything you just said. So instead of repeating, I'll list some tactical things. I think PQLs are going to become way more common than MQLs, XQLs, cold outbounding. Like cold outbounding will become a day of the past, or as Rob put it, maybe even MySpace. And so then I also think sales assist, what you call it, sales assist or product specialist or onboarding specialist or product advocate, it's going to become the job that the role that holds, it's the glue of the team. It's almost a necessity to making sure that users have the best experience, sales teams are getting the right leads and they're not bombarded. So, and that product and marketing and growth are getting great feedback from that sales assist role. So it's going to become a necessity. And I agree, tooling. I'm obviously excited about this given we're building the tooling for product-led sales, but it's going to become an absolute necessity. I built this internally at my last company. It was a horrible experience, a lot of resources, a lot of time, and it's just going to become a thing of the past where you want to build a CRM internally. So why would you build a product-led sales platform internally? And I love the community piece, and I'll flag, I agree, 2021 was let's acknowledge PLS. 2022 will be as a community, let's create the best frameworks and best practices, and we'll codify some of this. And so if you're not already in the product-led sales community, we'd love to have you. You can request an invite on pocus.com/community. We also have the first round of playbooks coming out in, Sandy, what is it, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? So we've been secretly working on playbooks for product-led sales. So you guys get the sneak peek into that. So if you join the community, you'll definitely see us launch it. We'll probably give community access first. We have some writers on the playbook on this call. Hi, Melissa. So it'll be really fun to hear your reactions to what you think V1 of the playbook looks like. And then as we continue to make it more advanced and interesting and robust over time as all together. So I really, really, really appreciate you all coming. Meka, you're awesome as always. I love your insights. And I'm excited to keep in touch with everyone. You can DM me on LinkedIn or Twitter or the Slack community. I always love chatting with everyone about this topic. And Meka, you can tell them your really cool Twitter name in case they have an awesome startup they want to DM you.
Yeah, big Meka style is my Twitter handle. So feel free to reach out there, or Meka at First Round if there's any way that I can be of service. And thank y'all so much for coming. Be a resource to each other. Like, being a sales leader, being a revenue leader, growth leader, sales ops is hard. Other people are struggling through the same thing. So like, never be afraid to just reach out to a company and be like, hey, I would love to understand how you're thinking about X, Y, or Z. I learned so much from just asking other people the stupid questions and avoiding their mistakes. And yeah, thanks for spending the last hour with us. And good to see so many familiar faces: Tim, Gio, Amanda, Apara, Jesse, Dan, a whole bunch of folks. Really, really good to see y'all here.
Awesome. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you.